Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel for another DC Multiverse McFarlane Toys figure unboxing and review video. Now today we will be taking a look at the rest of the first wave of Suicide Squad figures. I promised that we'd be taking a look at them in my Gold Label King Shark video, and of course, here they are. This first wave consists of Peacemaker, Bloodsport, Harley Quinn, and of course the Polka Dot Man, and I couldn't be more excited to get them out here. I absolutely loved this film, and one of the cool things about picking up this wave is that you can actually build yourself a King Shark that's in scale with the rest of these figures. How does he differ from the Gold Label King Shark? Well, we'll be comparing them throughout the course of this video. Do let me know if you are enjoying these DC Multiverse reviews. For all of their film figures at least, I do plan on picking them up and reviewing them on the channel, with the Justice League coming up very soon, so don't forget to hit that subscribe and bell notification icon so you're notified as soon as new videos go live on the channel. What we are going to do now though is get the box for Peacemaker lying flat in the light box and do the unboxing. Here of course we have the box art for Peacemaker. It's done in the usual DC Multiverse style, big honkin' logo right up here on the front of the box, plus an image of the Collect to Build King Shark. We also have an open window showcasing Peacemaker himself, his name down the side, and a massive image of John Cena as Peacemaker on the back of the box. We also have a couple more shots of the rest of the figures in the wave. Now I personally am loving the character selection for Wave 1. I'm also hoping that we do eventually get a Wave 2 with a couple more iconic characters from the film, but whether or not that happens remains to be seen. Now I'm pretty sure y'all are as excited as I am to see this guy out of the box, so let's get him out here. And here we have him in his clam tray. I have to say, I loved the character design of Peacemaker in Suicide Squad, and I personally cannot wait to see his solo show on HBO Max, and that's of course why we started off with him first. First impressions in hand, yeah, I'm actually really liking the texture and how hefty he feels. He's also a rather large figure. For those of you who don't know, McFarlane go with this 6.5 inch scale, so slightly bigger, and I personally really do like that. Now he also comes with the arms for the King Shark Build-A-Figure, plus his sword, an item that he does use in the film. Initially I was a little bit upset that he didn't come with his guns, but then again he did use it in the film. You also get his trading card and his stand in the back of the box. Now we will be proceeding just like we did with the Marvel Legends wave from Black Widow, where we unboxed all of the figures in rapid succession and then took a look at all of their accessories. So without further ado, what we're going to do now is bring out Harley Quinn. For Harley, her box art is identical to what we just saw with Peacemaker. Harley Quinn along the bottom, massive multiverse logo, and of course Harley herself in her red dress. We do have an image of Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn carrying the javelin, and of course they've just changed up the images down the bottom. Now we have Peacemaker where we otherwise would have had Harley. I personally really was hoping we'd get her first look from early on in the film, but this look did grow on me throughout the course of the movie, so I can't really complain. Now you can see that her package is largely taken up by the massive legs for King Shark. Now as I said in the intro, I've already technically reviewed that figure, but don't worry, we will be comparing this Build-A-Figure version to the Gold Label one that's already been reviewed on the channel. But here we have Harley Quinn. First in-hand impressions are just okay. She looks fine. I think that McFarlane's strengths definitely lie in masked characters, but don't worry, we will dissect this figure a little bit more in just a second. She also has her javelin there in the packaging, plus the trading card and the stand, like Peacemaker, glued in to the back of the box. What we are going to do now, though, is get Polka Dot Man out here and continue the unboxings. Who would have thought that by the end of Suicide Squad, this guy named Polka Dot Man would be a fan favorite? But for me, I'm super excited to get him out here. In fact, I'm tempted to already call it and say this guy might be my favorite of the wave. We do have an image of him just like all the other figures on the back of the box here. It is also the exact same image that they use on the trading card, so we will take a look at those when we see the accessories. And here we have him. The outfit design for Polka Dot Man didn't really, on paper, look like to me that it was very toyetic, but now having him in hand in action figure format, I can unequivocally say that he looks pretty darn awesome. Yeah, I love how this figure turned out. And we haven't even really got into the stuff he comes with yet, but don't worry, we definitely will. Now you have the various bits and pieces, plus his trading card and his display base in the back of the box here. Now we do have one more figure to unbox, and of course, it's Idris Elba's Bloodsport. Have I potentially saved the best for last? I don't know, those other figures have been fantastic, but Bloodsport has a killer look in the movie, and for the most part, it's replicated pretty darn well in action figure format. Bloodsport down the side, plus an image of Idris Elba in the costume on the back of the box. Now there are actually two versions of this figure, the one that I have right here that has the helmet on, but you can also get an unhelmeted variant. I didn't think the likeness was there for me personally, so I just opted for this guy. But I do know a lot of people love their unhelmeted figures, so I totally understand if you go for that particular version. But for me, this look was so darn awesome, I just skipped the unhelmeted versions of both him and Peacemaker. But do let me know if that's something you'd like to see compared to these guys in a future video. Now, just like the rest of the wave, you do get the Build-A-Figure components, plus, of course, his trading card and his display base in the back there. What we are going to do now, though, is get all of the accessories for all of the figures in this wave laid out in the light box and take a closer look at everything they come with. And here we have all of the accessories that come with the figures in Wave 1 for the Suicide Squad. Now, unfortunately, the figures themselves, as good as they are, they're a little bit let down by their accessories. Let's start off by talking about Peacemaker's sword first. Yes, this is the only accessory he comes with. In the film, he does use it, so yes, I'm happy that he does get it. He also uses a hatchet, and if you want that, you can pick up the unhelmeted variant, and then you get that weapon as well. But with both of them, you miss out on his gun, his Peacemaker. That's because Warner Brothers has a mandate that action figures can't come with guns. It's rather unfortunate, but I do have a potential solution that we'll touch on a little bit later in the video. We do get a javelin with Harley because of course she is given it in the movie. This is just done in an unpainted gold plastic. I do plan on adding a little bit of paint to it myself because the ends were a nice chrome silver, and it did have a brown leather wrap on it. The detail in the sculpt is all there. There's the intricate markings, and you can see the bit where the wrap is tied onto it. It's just unfortunately largely unpainted. Now, Polka Dot Man does come with the most in terms of accessories. He comes with a blast effect that is him shooting polka dots, which I absolutely love. This is the stuff right here. I'm so glad that McFarlane is branching out and doing some pretty darn awesome pieces like this right here. Even though they did let us down with the weapons, but then again, I know it's not their fault, it's a Warner Brothers mandate. He does come with a swap-out gauntlet, because in the film, when he activates his polka dot power, he sort of rotates a switch on the gauntlet, it opens up, and then the polka dots are released. You do also get a pair of goggles, which you can slot over the head sculpt. I'm usually not a huge fan of having swap out pieces. I would much rather just replace the head entirely and have the goggles on there, but this actually works fairly decently. More on that when we look at the figure. Lastly, for Bloodsport, you get two of these identical swords. In the film, he does use these swords, so once again it is accurate. But come on, I mean, Bloodsport used a ton of nanotech weapons, and they aren't guns in the traditional sense, so I reckon McFarlane could have gotten away with giving him some of his nanotech weapons. But unfortunately, they erred on the side of caution and went with two swords. You do get a trading card with each figure with that same exact image from the back of the box, one for Peacemaker, one for Harley, of course Bloodsport, and then Polka Dot Man, and each figure does come with the exact same DC Multiverse display stand. It's simple yet effective. I actually really like these. They get the job done marvelously. What we are going to do now, though, is get Peacemaker himself out here on the rotating turntable and take a closer look. Here we have Peacemaker standing straight up and down in the light box, no crazy poses or accessories or anything like that. And yeah, that's Peacemaker from the movie. McFarlane Toys always does one thing very well, and it's their digital sculpting. They go all out with the texture and the detail and the wrinkles, and it looks very, very good. And they've done that here as well. He looks fantastic. He's not 100% accurate to the movie, and we'll touch on that in just a second, but the overall look, yes, has been captured. They've also made sure to give everyone their own unique body style and proportions. I mean, it's no secret, John Cena, the dude is huge, and they've captured that really nicely here in figure format. And when you line him up with the rest of the figures in the wave, which we will be doing, you'll see that they all vary in size and height and shape, and I personally really love that. And here we have him up close and personal. To me, that right there looks like Peacemaker. It looks like John Cena from the film, but there are a couple of things which aren't 100% accurate. Number one, I'm not sure if you've already noticed it, but on his helmet, he doesn't actually have the Peacemaker logo. If you bring in the trading card, you can very clearly see he has this logo right here on the top of his helmet, but unfortunately, they just chose not to do it. I don't know if potentially this was based off early concept art and that's why they didn't, but nevertheless, that's the only thing that's really super inaccurate from the film. Everything else looks fantastic, including the likeness to John Cena. I can see it in that bottom mouth plate there. I know you don't get the full face, but yeah, to me, the likeness is definitely on point. I am tempted though to try and paint the helmet and these little rank symbols up on top here with some Molotov chrome just to give them a little bit more of a shinier look. Stay tuned to the end credits of the video to see how that looks. Now, as for the shirt here, I love the texture. It's jam-packed with amazing texture and also a couple of wrinkles over the top, so it does look suitably like a shirt. You also have the Peacemaker logo with his little bird there, and some more wrinkles on the back. This whole piece is actually a separate rubbery overlay, so you do have a little bit of articulation right up underneath this shirt here. The skin tone is just pretty basic and flat, and coming down to his gloves, they are a nice, punchy, vibrant blue. Another thing that's not quite accurate is the belt buckle. Once again on the card here, he has a silver belt buckle, and he doesn't have the little pouches where he stores his silencer, his extra ammo, and his blow dart, plus the holster on the other side for his gun, which of course he doesn't come with. Moving down to the pants, yep, a ton of sculpted in texture and detail here as well. They look magnificent. McFarlane never really lets us down when it comes to the sculpt, but sometimes with the paint applications, I wouldn't have minded a little bit of wash over the pants here. They just look a little bit too crisp. Lastly, coming down to the boots, they are just a basic military pair of boots, which is perfectly fine for me. I can absolutely imagine Peacemaker wearing these boots. Now, the one thing that kind of frustrates me is, of course, the lack of weaponry. I am tempted to either 3D print him his gun whenever someone makes the file, or just straight up give him the guns from Flashpoint Batman, and I will show you that a little bit later in the video. Just going over articulation on Peacemaker. Now bear in mind, this is my personal copy of the figure, so I'm going to be a little bit more careful. I'm sure when you get yours in hand, you can push the joints slightly further than I'm willing to go. Now, starting off with the head sculpt, you do get a really darn decent range of motion in pretty much all directions. It is on a fixed neck and there is no ball joint at the base of it, but that one single ball joint does more than enough work in my opinion. The arms themselves go up on ratchets to about there. They will go forward the full way around. There is a butterfly joint at the shoulder, but due to the nature of the sculpt of the bulky shirt here, you don't really get a ton of range. You do have a double bend at the elbow, which is incredibly stiff out of the box, and you get the full way up. It is, however, rather unsightly, but at the very least, it is ratcheted. You also get a swivel at the bicep. As for the torso, you have a swivel and a crunch forward and back because this upper shirt is actually a rubbery overlay. You also have some swivel and pivot side to side. The legs themselves will go forward to about there on ratchets. They will go out to about there. There is a teeny tiny amount of swivel at that joint, a double bend at the knee, once again going way past 90, and you do have a swivel forward and back at the boot, plus toe articulation. Moving on to Harley Quinn. This figure is a little bit of a mixed bag for me. There are some things which work very, very well, and there are others which kind of let the figure down. We will be discussing them a lot more in just a second, but the overall look is fairly decent. I like the skin tone, I like the tattoos, I like the sculpt of the red dress, the boots look great, but then we get to stuff like the head sculpt, which is a little bit generic, and those wrist joints. What were McFarlane thinking? If you're going to have a slender forearm, you can't then bulge out at the wrist. It just looks really weird. And that's exactly what they've done here. You can pose it away if you have her holding the javelin and kind of disguising those wrist joints, but for the most part, it looks a little bit goofy. Here we have her up close and personal. Now, I don't know if it's too early to tell that this figure is going to be my least favorite in the wave, but I'm tempted to call it right here and now, just because I can't really see the Margot Robbie likeness here. Let me know down in the comments if she looks like Margot to you. I mean, she does have a very Harley Quinn-esque smile. The tattoo is in the right place. She has the hair that comes down over the shoulders or can be pushed back if you'd like to do that. I reckon that actually helps the likeness just a little bit. But to me, I can't really see Margot. But then again, it can work as a generic Harley. Now, as for the body, I want to focus for a moment on the tattoos because they nailed it here. You can see property of no one. I don't know if mine is just missing the E or if it was like that in the film. I have to go back and check it. Got a J up there on her shoulder. You've got her Harley Quinn tattoo on the forearm. And then, of course, you've got Daddy's little monster up on the front here. As for the rest of them, though, they are kind of a little bit more sparse. I think in this film, she's actually got less tattoos than we saw in her previous outings. You do have down here, though, where it says pudding cups and a couple of tally marks, plus right up under there it says P plus H, obviously puddin plus Harley. The body itself is done in that same skin tone plastic as we've seen from Peacemaker, and I'm totally fine with that. It has that skin-like quality with a subtle teeny amount of translucency to it to make it look slightly more realistic. And the sculpt of the dress over the top actually looks pretty darn good. There's a lot going on here. There are ruffles, and you can see there are creases and bits and pieces that overlap itself. it looks fantastic. I have no complaints with the way they've sculpted the dress. It's just that head sculpt which is letting this figure down ever so slightly. Coming down to the legs, they have learnt their lesson from their Wonder Woman figure. If you haven't already, go ahead and check out the pictures of that Wonder Woman figure online, because her legs had no definition whatsoever. It's not the case here with Harley. There is definitely some definition on the thighs and down here in the lower part of the leg. It's not just one tubular sausage. Lastly, for the boots, these are the boots she was wearing in the film. I really like the leather grain texture here, and that they are undone towards the top. They looked exactly like this in the film, so that they have nailed. I have seen a couple of people do repaints on some McFarlane figures. I am tempted to ask someone to do that on mine, because the rest of this figure is really strong. I love the way the outfit looks. It's just that head sculpt which is throwing it off for me. Just going over articulation on Harley. Now, just like Peacemaker, she has the exact same style of neck joint. It's a fixed neck with a single ball joint in the base of the head. But due to how the hair is sculpted, how it kind of comes down on the back of the neck, you have a little bit more limited range, and a little bit more limited in terms of swivel as well. At least on mine, it's really, really stiff. You do, of course, have some pivot side to side. The arms themselves on ratchets go out to about there. They will go forward the full way. You have a swivel at the bicep, a double bend at the elbow, plus that traditional McFarlane style joint at the wrist, which a lot of people aren't a huge fan of. As for the waist, it does rotate underneath this rubbery overlay for the dress. The legs themselves are very restricted going forward, more so on this side, of course, because the majority of the dress is here, but you still get a fairly decent range. A tiny amount of swivel, a double bend at the knee there, a swivel side to side, pivot forward and back, down here at the ankle, plus of course, toe articulation. Next up, here we have Bloodsport, and this was one I was so very excited about, and for good reason, because this figure is jam-packed with sculpted in detail. As I said earlier, that's one thing that McFarlane does very well, and they've done it here. The other thing that they usually nail, though, is the paint application process. Except this time, I think that's this figure's weakest part. He looks a little bit more like Deathstroke than Bloodsport. I mean, he had this metallic goldish orange hue on the outfit, and we will touch on this a lot more in just a second, but here in figure format, it just comes across a little bit cartoony. Kind of like this is Bloodsport from Fortnite versus Bloodsport from the film. Don't get me wrong, I'm still loving the way this guy looks, and when I pose him up, he looks awesome. But the color scheme is just a little bit too vibrant for me personally. And here we have him up close and personal. Now, this guy had one of, if not the most interesting costume designs in the movie. I loved the way their costume looked for Bloodsport. Did they manage to capture that badass look in figure format? For the most part, yes, it is largely successful, but the one issue that I have is in the color scheme. The sculpt is fantastic, but as you can see, based on the image that literally comes included with the figure, it's just far too vibrant. This was more of a really dark black to navy blue, just with a little bit of a metallic highlight on the various nanotech weapon parts, whereas this guy kind of goes for more of a Deathstroke color scheme with the orange and blue. I still really like the way it looks, but it's not accurate to the film. But that being said, the sculpt is, and they have done a marvelous job here. I love the helmet for Bloodsport with the alien xenomorph style lower jaw there, and the teeth up the front. A lot of people are comparing this costume design to Taskmaster from Black Widow. And yes, I can totally see the similarities, but to me, this costume definitely wins. It looks way more badass, at least in the movie. Now unfortunately, none of the nanotech weapon pieces, including the 2 handguns that he has on the chest here, and the bigger rifles down here on the hips, you can't detach any of that or combine any of it, but at the very least they are fully sculpted in, including this piece, which actually became the front rotating barrel of that big honkin' gun. I am hoping that someone makes some 3D printer files so I can make those weapons, because this guy had a ton of awesome gadgets in the movie. He also had this sort of crossbow style thing on the inside of his gauntlet, and that's not there either. You do get some trigger finger hands though, so if you do manage to source some weapons yourself, he will at the very least be able to hold them. Now something that I haven't quite touched on yet is these diaper style pieces where the legs meet the body. They've done that to have a much more smooth transition between the rest of the outfit and the legs. There's not a whole bunch of breakup here, but they are a softer rubber, so that means if you have the leg posed like this for a long period of time, and then you drop it back down, they do leave a little bit of a gap there before they slowly work their way back to being flat. I personally am not a huge fan of that. I would have preferred just a straight up normal style leg joint and omit the rubber entirely, but I totally get what they're going for. This is a much cleaner look. Overall though, even though the color scheme is slightly off on the figure, I am tempted to try my hand at painting it to be more movie accurate. But let's be honest, it's still a really badass looking costume design. The only thing is, it's not overly film accurate. Just going over articulation on Bloodsport. Now he will be largely similar to Peacemaker, just with a couple of differences, because the articulation scheme is pretty much the same. Now starting off with the head sculpt first, it is way more restricted than Peacemaker. You do get swivel side to side, not a ton up and down, and a teeny amount of pivot. The arms will go up to about there. They will go forward the full way, a little bit of butterfly at the shoulder, a double bend at the elbow, a swivel at the bicep, and of course that traditional McFarlane style joint for the wrist. As for the torso, you have swivel, crunch forward and back, and pivot side to side. The legs go forward on ratchets to about there, they'll go out to about there, a teeny tiny amount of swivel, a double bend here at the knee, and of course coming down to the foot, swivel, pivot forward and back, plus toe articulation. Lastly, here we have Polka Dot Man, the one that I've been so very excited about, and it turns out for good reason. This guy is awesome. Don't worry though, we will be looking at the King Shark Build-A-Figure parts in just a second. Back to Polka Dot Man though, the outfit looks fantastic. It's colourful, it's got a wash over the top, the texture is all there. The head sculpt, I think, is one of the strongest in the wave, right up there alongside the Peacemaker John Cena likeness. This guy looks like the actor from the film, and don't worry, we will be punching in to dissect it a little bit further. Overall though, yeah, I'm really happy with this Polka Dot Man figure, and I think he also comes with the best accessories in the wave. I love that effect piece. Honestly, if you were just to pick up one figure from this wave and have a standout highlight figure, I would be tempted to say it's this guy, or at the very least this guy coming in a close second with Peacemaker. And here we have him up close and personal, and I have taken the liberty of popping his goggles on. We will remove them though in just a second. This might just be my favourite figure in the wave. I love the way this looks. There is a ton of texture sculpted into the outfit. It's extremely accurate to the movie. In fact, I think this guy might be the most accurate to the film in terms of the detail. I also love that you do have the swap out gauntlet. Now, in the movie, on the inside of the gauntlet, there were those pulsating colourful lights. Obviously, they didn't try and replicate that here, but that's something that we could do. We could actually paint on the inside of these crevices there, just to give them that more colourful, lit-up look. He is also missing a little bit of paint from the silver buttons and the zips down the front, and also from around the front of his goggles there. You can very clearly see it on the card. He has the silver zips and the silver trim around the goggles. I definitely will be adding that onto my Polka Dot Man. But for the rest of it, he looks great. There's even a wash over the actual outfit itself, just to bring out that really nicely sculpted in texture, and that goes for the entire thing. I also love the sort of tan look to the boots. It's a really nice contrast between the rest of the outfit, and it matches perfectly with the belt and the underwraps for the gauntlets. The only massive complaint I have though is with the wrist pegs. Why did they not go with skin tone here? I mean, it looks kind of weird. I would have much preferred them to match the color of the hands. The fact that they match the underwraps for the gauntlets kind of doesn't work for me. But something that does work for me is the head sculpt. With the goggles on, he looks great. I mean, he looks like the actor from the movie. Then when you remove them, I mean, yeah, it's not the best likeness out there, but I can still, from some angles, definitely see Polka Dot Man. Do let me know what you think of this head sculpt, though, down in the comments below. For me, for the price point that McFarlane is coming in at, I really like the way he looks. Just going over articulation on Polka Dot Man. Now it is almost identical to the other two male figures in the wave, it's just this time the body is a little bit thinner. Starting off with the head sculpt first, this might just be the most restricted out of the three. You do get a teeny amount of up and down, swivel left and right, and a tiny bit of pivot. The arms will go up the full way, same thing with going forward. There is a butterfly joint at the shoulder, which actually gets the most range out of the wave, which is good because you do want him to be able to bring his arms around the front of him to activate his polka dot power. You have a swivel at the bicep, a double bend at the elbow that gets you way past 90, and of course down here for the wrist you have that traditional McFarlane style wrist joint. For the torso you have swivel, crunch forward and back, and pivot side to side. The legs will go forward the full way, same thing going out on soft ratchets, a teeny tiny amount of swivel, a double bend at the knee which gets you all the way up, and of course that usual McFarlane style joint for the ankle, plus toe articulation. Just before we actually go ahead and build King Shark, I thought it might be worth taking a look at the various components. Now, this right here is rather interesting. If you'll remember from my King Shark Gold Label video, he literally has no articulation in the legs due to these super thick and sturdy rubbery shorts. But as you can see, on the inside he does have a full complement of moving parts and pieces. He also does have knees that can bend, but once again, it's just these shorts which make it impossible to use those points of articulation. I'm still hoping someone goes ahead and makes some swap out fabric shorts for this King Shark. Now the two torso pieces do snap together. These are the only pieces on the entire figure that feel a little bit lightweight and flimsy. You can hear they are just hollow plastic, but at the very least they are sculpted and painted very, very nicely. And when you snap them together, you'll never notice that they are just a little bit more hollow. I do want to point out though that the arms are pegged in on some very thin little pieces, so do be careful when you are moving around his arms. Now, if you'll remember, on my Gold Label King Shark, my belly portion had a little bit of a paint chip, so thankfully with this guy it's a total non-issue, and I do like the fact that they say down, so you know, yep, this one goes towards the bottom. You do also get the noggin for King Shark, of course, with a fully opening jaw. I'm not sure if I showcased this well enough in my previous video, but the top row of teeth actually come down when you move the jaw down to open the mouth. It's a neat little touch, and I really like the way they've done that. That just means when you have the mouth fully closed, it can be just that, fully closed. You don't have to worry about snapping these teeth into these teeth up on top. It's a rather ingenious design, so yeah, I really like that. The arms are also relatively simple. These have slightly more paint on the inside part. If you'll recall, on the gold label one, it was a little bit more sparse, where this one actually comes around and wraps around the front for this nice, subtle white look when you look at him front on. What we are going to do now, though, is take all of the parts and pieces off camera and build King Shark. And here we have him fully assembled. Now, we won't be spending a ton of time taking a look at this guy because I pretty much did a full review on him. He is identical to the solo version that you can buy fully built and separate to the rest of the wave. The only difference here is this time you don't get the blood around the mouth, he doesn't come with the severed limbs, and the paint applications or the print on the shorts is different. It's literally just a blue pair of shorts with a white dry brushing over the surface this time. The sculpt is identical. I do really like the texture here though. With the first version, you couldn't really see this quilted sort of pattern, and the dry brush picks up on it very, very nicely. You can also see a couple of tears in the wrinkles, and of course around the bottom it's torn as well. The shorts look really good, but functionally they are of course terrible because you cannot move the legs at all. As for the paint applications on the body and the head, it's pretty much identical, just no blood this time. Now, I have been told by folks in the States that unfortunately y'all don't have access to the one with the blood around his mouth. For some reason they deemed it a little bit too gory for the US market. Luckily down here in Australia though, they managed to ship some out. I personally wouldn't be too fussed. I still think he looks fantastic without the blood, but I totally get it. It kind of makes getting the gold label one just a little bit less sweet. I'll be displaying one of mine, probably munching on the severed limbs, of course, nom nom, and the other one with his mouth closed, so you do have a little bit of versatility if you decide to pick up both versions of King Shark. Now for a quick side-by-side comparison, here we have the whole wave standing together, plus the collector build King Shark in the background, and I mean, he is huge. I really love that King Shark figure. If you are tempted to pick up this wave solely for the King Shark, yeah, I wouldn't blame you, because he really is that darn good. But as for the rest of the figures, they're great in their own right. Like I said earlier, they do have different, unique sizes and proportions of the bodies going on here, because these are proper different people. They're not just the same body that they've taken and popped a different outfit on there and then called it a day. No, they've sat down and fully sculpted each person uniquely to fit the character, and I love that. Peacemaker is the biggest, he's the bulkiest, he's the tallest, followed by Bloodsport, then Polka Dot Man, who is just about the same height as Harley, but a little bit more scrawny, and then Harley is completely different, with a lot of exposed skin, and the dress, which has a ton of unique sculpting going on. I love the way these figures look together. Honestly, they're so different and so varied and so unique that you probably would have thought at first glance that they were different figures by different companies. And that goes to show that, yeah, McFarlane can do big, beefy, chunky figures like Peacemaker, but then when it comes to figures like Harley, they can definitely do that as well. Next up, here we have the squad alongside the TVA Loki from the Disney Plus Marvel Legends wave. And as you can see, the McFarlane figures do go for a bigger scale. I personally really like the 6.5 inch scale. The figures feel more substantial in your hand, you feel like you're getting more bang for your buck, whereas the Marvel Legends figures do go a little bit more on the smaller side, but I totally get that as well. They can work with Figuarts and Mafex and other lines, whereas these Justice League figures and the Suicide Squad figures are just slightly too big to scale with the counterparts from Mezco and Mafex, etc. Still, I totally understand why someone would like the bigger scale as well as the smaller scale of Marvel Legends. Lastly, as promised, here we have the collector build King Shark on the left and the gold label version on the right. I'm going to be honest, I straight up prefer the gold label version. I like the print on the shorts better, even though the blue shorts do a better job of highlighting the texture. I just love the print. I also love the severed limbs. It's much more in keeping with the character of King Shark, and plus you can have him standing there munching on them, which I really do like. Also, the blood effects. I love how that looks a little bit more dynamic, and he looks like he means business. He can either be doing something whimsical, like standing here munching on the limbs, or he can be posed in a way that makes him look incredibly fierce and intimidating, whereas the Build-A-Figure version is just a little bit more stripped down. It's still great value for those who don't want to go out and pick up the gold label offering, but for me, I still think that guy is the superior one. Just wrapping up on the DC Multiverse The Suicide Squad wave. Now, going into this, I was pretty darn excited, and now at the end of this, I can honestly say it was for good reason. These figures are pretty great. I mean, they aren't flawless, you can't really expect that at this price point and this scale. There are going to have to be some concessions, be it in accessories or sculpt or in paint applications. And for some figures in the wave, a mix of all three of those. I have given the Peacemaker the gun from Flashpoint Batman, which he should have come with. They already have the sculpt for this Desert Eagle. I mean, the gun is a lot longer in the movie, in fact, almost comically long, but this still works as a weapon. I know that Warner Brothers have this weird mandate that they can't come with the weapons that they used in the movie if they are firearms. I don't still exactly know why. I mean, this is an R18 movie, and these figures are based off that film, so I wouldn't be surprised if sometime down the line they walk back on that decision. Overall though, the figures themselves, putting accessories aside, are pretty great. I love the paint applications, I love the sculpt, even though a few washes and extra details could make these figures really pop, out of the box they still look fantastic. My favorite of the wave is, of course, Polka Dot Man. He comes with the most stuff, the effect piece is awesome, the sculpt is great, and then it's probably Peacemaker, Bloodsport, and lastly, Harley. They all, in their own right, are pretty darn good figures, but when you have them together as the squad, they really do pop on the shelf. There's something about this band of misfits in figure format that just work. As I said in the intro though, I'm hoping that we do get a wave 2 with some extra characters. Rick Flag, Ratcatcher 2 would be among my top picks. Do let me know who else you would like to see though in the comments. Now if you are looking to pick up this wave, unfortunately it's sold out with toyswonderland.com, but they do have other McFarlane Toys waves up for pre-order right now, including the Zack Snyder's Justice League wave. Review for that is coming very soon to the channel, so definitely subscribe and hit that bell notification icon so you're notified as soon as new content goes live on the channel. If you are heading down to the description, check out number 1, the link to toyswonderland.com, and number 2, the link to 6 Scale Network, the awesome Facebook group. Come along, chat figures, share photos of your collection, and of course, see what's coming up next on the channel. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video. As promised, here we have the end credit scene where I showcase some custom work I've done with my Molotov liquid chrome pen. If you are ever looking to do some chrome paint applications quickly and relatively cheaply, this is the way to go. I absolutely love this paint pen. The first thing that I did was obviously to chrome Peacemaker's helmet. I'm super happy with how it turned out. It's not perfect due to the imperfect nature of the sculpt itself. It's not entirely perfectly smooth, but when you hit it with the chrome pen, yeah, it looks exactly like it did in the movie. I'm incredibly pleased with the finish. Next up, I did the same thing for Polka Dot Man. I did the rims of his glasses, plus the zippers all the way down the front of his outfit, and a couple of his buttons as well. It's now accurate to the movie and adds a little bit more of a pop of color, if there wasn't enough already, of course, on the front of his suit. Lastly, I also chromed the ends of the javelin. Now, with the chrome pen, you do have to wait quite a while for it to dry. If you want it to be drier quicker, you can heat it with a hairdryer, but it still won't be 100% cured. It'll still take some time. Nevertheless, I personally am really happy with the results.